菜根谭
Tending the roots of wisdom.
129，戒疏于虑，谨商于察。
129. Exercise caution in foresight. Stay vigilant in observation.
菜根谭原文：害人之心不可有，防人之心不可无，此戒疏于虑也。宁受人之欺，无逆人之诈，此谨商于察也。二语并存精明而浑厚矣。
白话文注解：害人之心不可有，防人之心不可无。此话告诫人们与人交往时思想不可过于麻痹，宁可受人欺骗，也不揣测别人用心险恶。此话是用来劝诫那些过于疑神疑鬼的人。假如一个人在和别人相处时能牢记上面的2句话，那才算得上警觉性高而又不失淳朴宽厚的为人之道。
129-1. Do not harbor intentions to harm others, but also do not lack caution against others. This statement advises people to avoid being overly naive in their interactions with others. It's better to be deceived by others than to constantly suspect their intentions as sinister. This statement aims to caution those who are excessively suspicious. If a person can keep these 2 sayings in mind when interacting with others, they can be considered alert without losing their simplicity and generosity in their way of dealing with others. Translated by Bayan Defu.
129-2. Don't hold malice in your heart for another, and don't be without a wary mind. This cautions those lacking prudence. It is better to be cheated by others than to spend one's time getting back at them. This admonishes those who turn upon their own good judgment. Side by side, these 2 sayings clarify the qualities of total genuineness. Translated by Robert Aitken Daniel W. Wyckoff. 129-3. One must never scheme against others, but one must always be wary of others. This is a warning against loss of vigilance. It is better to risk being cheated than always to assume beforehand that others are out to cheat you. This is a warning against premature or faulty judgments about others. Keep these 2 admonitions side by side in your mind, and you will be regarded as a man of keen sagacity and upright virtue. Translated by Paul White.
129-4. The heart to harm others should not exist, but the heart to guard against others should not be absent. This statement warns people not to be overly naive in their thinking when dealing with others. Better to be deceived by others than to suspect others of malicious intentions. This advice is meant for those who are overly suspicious. If a person can keep these 2 sayings in mind when interacting with others, they can be considered vigilant without losing the qualities of simplicity, generosity, and kindness. Translated by Wen Lin.
130，辨别是非，认识大体。
130. Distinguish right from wrong, understand celestial phenomena.
菜根谭原文：无因群疑而阻独见，无任己意而废人言，无思小会而伤大体，无借公论以快私情。
白话文注解：不要因为众人怀疑而放弃自己的主张，也不要因固执己见而拒绝别人的意见。不要因占小便宜而损伤人格，不要操纵大众舆论来满足一己之私。
130-1. Do not abandon your own convictions due to others' doubts, nor reject others' opinions solely due to your own stubbornness. Do not compromise your integrity for small gains, and refrain from manipulating public opinion to serve personal interests. Translated by Bayan Defu.
130-2. Don't let public doubts thwart your personal views. Don't invest in your own ideas and disregard the words of others. Don't pursue small favors and thus violate larger principles. Don't enlist public opinion to justify your own comfortable circumstances. Translated by Robert Aitken Daniel W. Wyckoff. 130-3. Do not discard your views just because others doubt them. Do not stick stubbornly to your own opinions while rejecting out of hand those of others. Do not harm the general interest for private ends. Do not try to murder public opinion to achieve your own satisfactions. Translated by Paul White.
130-4. Do not abandon your principles because of others' suspicions. And do not reject others' opinions because of your own stubbornness. Do not compromise your character for minor gains. And do not manipulate public opinion to satisfy personal interests. Translated by Wenlin.
131. 亲近善人须知机度谗，铲除恶人应保密防祸。
131. Approaching virtuous people requires understanding motives and guarding against slander. Uprooting evil individuals demands confidentiality to prevent harm.
菜根谭原文：善人未能极亲，不宜欲扬，恐来谗赠之间；恶人未能轻去，不宜先发，恐遭没灭之祸。
白话文注解：想要结交一个有修养的好人，不要提前宣扬，为的是避免引起坏人的嫉妒诽谤。想要除去一个心地险恶的坏人，不能草率，不要过早揭露其恶行，以免打草惊蛇，反遭恶人报复。
131-1. To befriend a well-cultivated individual. It is unwise to openly praise and promote the relationship beforehand, as this might trigger jealousy and slander from malicious individuals. When trying to disengage from a person with malicious intentions, avoid acting hastily or dismissively, and refrain from prematurely exposing their wrongdoing, as doing so might alert them and lead to potential retaliation. Translated by Bayandefu.
131-2. If you can't make friends with a pleasant person right away, don't say flattering things prematurely just to ward off wicked slander. If you can't easily distance yourself from iniquitous people, don't declare yourself prematurely just to avoid malicious gossip. Translated by Robert Aitken Daniel W. Wyckoff. 131-3. When making friends with good men, you should not suddenly become close to them. Nor should you make your intentions widely known prematurely. That way you risk incurring the slander of evil men. When pushing bad people from you, you should not lightly banish them from your presence. Nor should you prematurely disclose their misdeeds. That way you risk allowing mischief makers to stir up trouble. Translated by Paul White.
131-4. If you want to make friends with a cultured person, avoid prematurely boasting about it to prevent jealousy and slander from malicious individuals. If you want to rid yourself of a malicious person, be cautious and do not hastily expose their misdeeds to avoid retaliation from the wrongdoer. Translated by Wenlin.
132. 结义来自暗示不欺，经纶敲除临深履薄。
132. Integrity arises from fair dealings in private. Strategies unfold when facing challenges with caution.
菜根谭原文：青天白日的结义，自按屋漏室中培来，旋乾转坤的经纶，自临深履薄处操出。
白话文注解：光明磊落的人格和节操，都是从寒门自律的艰苦环境中培养出来的；治国平天下的雄才伟略，都是从小心谨慎的做事态度中磨练出来的。
132-1. An upright and principled character is nurtured through the rigorous self-discipline of humble origins, while the ability to govern a country and bring peace to the world stems from the meticulous and cautious approach to handling matters from an early stage. Translated by Bayandefu.
132-2. The character that is like clear sky in broad daylight is generated in dark rooms under leaky roofs. The statesmanship that can right the course of the cosmos is born of probing profound depths and of treading on thin ice. Translated by Robert Aitken Daniel W. Wyckoff. 132-3. An upright and virtuous personality, which shines like broad daylight, is fostered in a dark hut with a leaky roof. The art of ruling the world is formed and gradually perfected with the same great caution and circumspection with which a man walks along the edge of a precipice or on a lake covered with a thin sheet of ice. Translated by Paul White.
132-4. An upright character and integrity are cultivated through self-discipline in the harsh environment of humble origins. The ability to govern a country and bring peace to the world is honed through a careful and prudent approach to handling tasks. Translated by Wenlin.
133. 伦常本乎天性，不可任得怀恩。
133. Ethical norms originate from human nature. One should not expect gratitude or repayment when performing virtuous deeds.
菜根谭原文：父慈子孝，兄友弟恭，纵做到极处，俱是何当如此，着不得一毫感激的念头。如施者任德，受者怀恩，便是路人，便成是道矣。
白话文注解：父母对子女的慈祥，子女对父母的孝顺，兄姐对弟妹的爱护，弟妹对兄姐的尊敬等等，即便拿出最大爱心做到最完美境界，也都是骨肉至亲之间本该如此，是人类与生俱来的天性，彼此之间绝对不可以存有要求感激回报的想法。假如父母怀着施恩图报的观念，儿女基于感恩报答的心理，那就等于把骨肉至亲变成了路上陌生的人，把出自真诚的骨肉亲情变成了一种市井交易。
133-1. The kindness of parents towards their children. The filial piety of children towards their parents. The care of siblings for each other, and the respect of younger siblings for their older ones. No matter how selflessly and perfectly executed, these behaviors are intrinsic to close family relationships. They are part of human nature from birth, and should never be accompanied by expectations of gratitude or repayment. If parents approach their actions with the intention of seeking something in return, or if children respond out of a sense of obligation, it would turn the natural bond of family into a transaction and genuine affection into a mere exchange. Translated by Bayandefu.
133-2, to the very last, the father's affection, the child's filial piety, the elder brother's friendliness, and the younger brother's respect are altogether fitting and appropriate and are not pretense. However, with the least thought of being benevolent or dutiful, or of receiving blessings or of winning someone over, you become a kind of passerby. Your interaction becomes a market transaction. Translated by Robert Aitken Daniel W. Wyckoff. 133-3. The father is kind to his children. The children are filial to their parents. Elder brothers cherish younger brothers, who in turn respect their elder brothers. Even if such conduct reaches the acme of perfection, it is no more than what ought to be done. It is not a matter of gratitude. If a father congratulates himself on being kind to his children, and if the children want to measure their rewards for his kindness, then family members become strangers and kinship ties are reduced to the level of market transactions. Translated by Paul White.
133-4. The kindness of parents towards their children. The filial piety of children towards their parents. The care of older siblings for younger ones. And the respect of younger siblings for older ones. These aspects of deep familial love are inherent in human nature and should naturally exist among close relatives. There should never be an expectation of gratitude or repayment. If parents approach their children with the mentality of expecting something in return for their kindness, and if children reciprocate with a sense of obligation, it would turn the profound bonds of kinship into a transaction akin to strangers on the street, transforming sincere family affection into a mundane exchange. Translated by Wen Lin.
134. 不夸言好节，无丑污之辱。
134. Do not boast of beauty and cleanliness, and there will be no disgrace of ugliness and filth.
菜根谭原文：有颜必有丑为之对，我不夸颜，谁能丑我？有节必有污为之仇，我不好节，谁能污我？
白话文注解：大凡人间的事情，有美好就有丑陋与之相对，假如我不自夸美好，又有谁能丑化我呢？大凡世上的东西，有洁净就有肮脏与之相对，假如我不自赞洁净，又有谁能脏污我呢？
134-1. Where there is beauty, there inevitably exists ugliness. If I refrain from boasting about my own beauty, who can label me as ugly? Likewise, purity has its counterpart in impurity. If I avoid boasting of my own purity, how can anyone accuse me of being unclean? Translated by Bayandefu.
134-2. If there is beauty, then inevitably there is ugliness in opposition. If I take no pride in my beauty, who can call me ugly? Integrity is the opposite of corruption. If I do not covet integrity, who can call me corrupt? Translated by Robert Aitken Daniel W. Wyckoff. 134-3, If there is beauty there must be ugliness. If I do not boast of my beauty, how can anyone call me ugly? The counterpart of cleanliness is filthiness. If I do not boast of my cleanliness, how can anyone call me dirty? Translated by Paul White.
134-4. In all human affairs, where there is beauty, there is ugliness in contrast. If I do not boast of beauty, who can defame me? In all things in the world, where there is cleanliness, there is dirtiness in contrast. If I do not praise cleanliness, who can dirty me? Translated by Wen Lin.
135. 富多言良，亲多妒忌。
135. Wealth experiences more warmth and coldness than poverty, and closeness among family members often leads to more jealousy and suspicion than with strangers.
菜根谭原文：言良之态，富贵更甚于贫贱；妒忌之心，骨肉有狠于外人。此处若不当以冷常，欲以平气，显不日作烦恼障中矣。
白话文注解：人情高低、冷暖、厚薄的变化，富贵之家比穷困人家表现得更加露骨。猜疑、嫉妒、记恨的心态，来自亲人的伤害比外人更狠。遇到这种情况，倘若不能用冷静态度来应对，或者不能用理智来压抑自己不平的情绪，那就难免不陷于日作愁成的烦恼状态。
135-1. The fluctuations of human relationships, ranging from warmth to coldness, from kindness to indifference, are more overtly expressed in affluent families than in impoverished ones. The feelings of suspicion, jealousy, and resentment are even more intense when they come from relatives rather than strangers. Faced with such situations, if one cannot respond with a composed attitude or suppress their own sense of injustice with reason, it's hard to avoid being trapped in a state of distress that weighs heavily on the mind. Translated by Bayan Defu.
135-2, Fickleness is a predilection of the wealthy much more than of the poor and lowly. Jealousy among relatives is more so than among strangers. If you do not consider these points with cool bowels, and govern yourself calmly, then you will be subject to vexation every day. Translated by Robert Aitken Daniel W. Wyckoff. 135-3, The fickleness of human relationships is more striking among the rich than among the poor. Suspicion and jealousy are more painful between kindred than between strangers. Thus, if people cannot face such a painful situation with a cool head and a peaceful mind, they can hardly escape being in a constant state of vexation. Translated by Paul White.
135-4. The fluctuations in human relationships, ranging from warmth to coldness, generosity to stinginess, are more overtly displayed in affluent families than in impoverished ones. The mentality of suspicion, jealousy, and resentment often hurts more when it comes from relatives than from strangers. Faced with such situations, if one cannot respond with a calm attitude or suppress their own feelings of discontent with reason, they may inevitably fall into a state of constant worry and vexation. Translated by Wen Lin.
136. 功过不可少混，恩仇不可过明。
136. Achievements and mistakes should not be overly mingled, and favors and enmities should not be overly disclosed.
菜根谭原文：功过不容少混，混则人怀堕惰之心；恩仇不可太明，明则人起邪二之志。
白话文注解：功劳和过失不可含混不清。假如功过含混不清，就会使人心灰意懒而不求上进。恩惠和怨恨不可表现得太明显，假如恩怨太显露，就容易使人因生疑以致背叛。
136-1. Achievements and mistakes should not be mixed up. If they are, it can lead to a sense of disillusionment and a lack of motivation for improvement. Similarly, favors and grievances should not be overly apparent. If they are, it can easily lead to doubts and even betrayal. Translated by Bayan Defu.
136-2, merit and demerit must not in any way be confused. If they are, people will slack off. Kindness and grudges, on the other hand, should not be differentiated too much. If they are, then people will have second thoughts about you. Translated by Robert Aitken Daniel W. Wyckoff. 136-3, there should be no ambiguity as regards others, merits and failures. Otherwise, people will become slack and cease to strive to advance. However, favors done for others and grudges held against others should not be too clear-cut. Otherwise, people will shy away from you. Translated by Paul White.
136-4. Clarity is crucial when assessing others' merits and failures. Ambiguity only fosters complacency and hinders progress. Yet, when it comes to extending kindness or holding resentment, subtlety is key. Being overly explicit in these matters can drive people away. Translated by Wen Lin.